I'm wondering for you, for your work on the plantation and kind of reconstructing these slaves' narratives and giving your tours, do you have some kind of story that you can recall where you really feel like you impacted someone, that the education the opportunity for education that you were providing for them, they actually took it on, and maybe they even expressed to you gratitude for that? Have you experienced that at all?
Yes, recently, most of our visitors are elderly or older individuals. Um, so I've had a couple come in, and after the tour was over, my like I said, my tours are mostly by the enslaved individuals that worked there or labored there. And he gave me this card where these restorative questions on it. He said, he said, I have grandchildren that are mixed. And he said, I've been really trying to do the work and trying to get better, understanding their plight, what they will go through as, because they're gonna people are gonna look at them. They know they're mixed, but they're gonna present as black children. They're gonna say, okay. But it's a white family. So I like the fact that he's educating himself. He said, you taught me a lot while I was here, and it made me understand a lot more. And that right there, it just touched my heart because he was like, it made me feel like, oh man, I've helped this man progress in his path, his path of understanding the plight of black folks, or his or race here in America, Um, so that's something that was really, really, really special to me.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, you're that is the pinnacle, right? Is like having someone be
Yeah.
like, you helped me understand better. That is
I mean, he gave
everything
me
for
his
a
email
teacher.
and everything. Yeah, he gave me his email. He gave me the questions that he was looking at, the restorative questions I have in my phone. And I think these questions were questions that he would ask other white people when he was engaging with them about race. And then I think these questions were presented to him first. But I want to see if I can find them, but I don't know if I
Do you know where
can.
he
But
got those questions from?
I have no idea. He had
But
a card.
but probably from some other anti-racist advocate. I would assume, right? Like,
I'm
he probably encountered somebody else, got those questions, and he came to you, and you were like the follow-up. So look at that.
yeah.
Look at how we're all working together, even though we're working separately, right? And this is something that I also want to emphasize with all my other anti-racist activists. Like, we may not directly be collaborating all the time, but as long as there is a critical mass of us, that's what's going to
Mhm.
happen. People are going to bounce from person to person, getting that same education, that same experience, and that's what makes a difference. That
Mhm.
consistency is key, and you provided that. That's amazing, man.
Yeah. And so I want to also share one of the questions with you real quick. What it was basically, it's restorative question says, what happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? Who has been affected by what you have done? In what way? And so when I read those questions, that made me feel like, was he, you know, I think at times some white folks don't understand how they may come off to some people, and I do want to use as a segue as a into a conversation that I had with a coworker at my job,
Okay.
who's the lead interpreter, who's my boss. Um, but I think sometimes white people, when they don't educate themselves and they don't have to deal with biases and stereotypes, they become immune to uh, living in America. It's like, oh, what privilege? We don't have privilege. What do you mean? There's no such thing as. That's why they can say that. What do you mean white supremacy? There's no such thing as white supremacy or racism. Just like I think I was watching the conservatives. I was watching what is the lady's name? Was man. But I remember one of them mentioning that they didn't believe redlining existed. There is so many studies and research done on that. Um, but this is coming from a black person. But it's just amazing to me how people don't educate themselves and don't understand things. I don't think it exists because they haven't been through it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to mention the conversation that I had at work with a coworker who was a lead interpreter. She interprets the home as well. This is a historic home that we interpret largely. And she's a feminist. She says I'm a feminist, but this is a white woman. This woman, I believe she's middle aged, and I made a comment because one day we had visitors from the Netherlands. It was a mixed couple. It was a white man and a black woman. They both were not, they both were not America. They came to America to visit. They had been in different states, and they chose to come to Charlotte, North Carolina, and visited Charlotte, and then so they didn't have anything. They had no idea about slavery, race. It wasn't something that was close to them like it is you and me because we were born here. So I'm assuming that you were born here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I made a comment. I was asking another coworker of mine. I said, "Hey, I said I think it's fascinating how um, black people from other countries, they seem to not know anything about slavery." Um, and she says, "Well, that's because it's not that important to them because they're from another." I said I think it's important to know because they're part of that diaspora. I believe American slavery has affected every part of the world because if you go to other countries, some countries you might be. I mean, you know more about this than I do because you've been to Europe. You say you've been treated way better than you've been treated here. Um, I you're treated in a way that is biased, or some people might look at you like, who is this black person here, or look at you a certain way because of the way America puts you out or puts black people out in the media. And I think that's another story and it's a part of it. But anyway, going back to our conversation, she stated that, well, that's because they don't think it's important. Other countries have more history. We're a very young country, and other countries have thousands and thousands of years of history, and we barely have 200 years of history. We don't have that much history. And so I said, okay. And she said, well, America does not hold the market share on trauma. And so to me, when she said that, because I was talking about slavery, we got into a conversation about slavery and how bad it. Well, there were slaves in Europe. There were slaves. What about the Irish? What about the Italian? The Italian. These are all things that I've heard white supremacists. These are white supremacist talking points. You heard. Well, the Irish were enslaved. There were Italian slaves. What about the Roman slaves? What about the Christian? You know, and so we were going back and forth. I felt like she was being very dismissive of my feelings. I said, ma'am, let's talk about today. If you would have called the police, it got heated. She's like, I'm a feminist, and you know, um, I feel like you're mansplaining, and I'm like, I don't know, I love women. I love women. This is something that I know. I'm not a female, but I respect all women. And so we call the cops on me today or right now. The cops will come to me and ask me what I did before they talk to you, even if I called them first. And I said, "What do you think that comes from? What do you think that type of thinking comes from? Those ideologies, those things they come from white supremacy." Well, she starts talking about how her mom and her uncle or whoever else didn't see color. And that's and once again, she restated that America does not hold the market share on traumatic experiences. And I said I understand that a lot of things happened in other countries. Yeah, we had the Holocaust and all these other things that happened. Yes, there are atrocities all over the world. But you're talking to a black man today, and you're dismissing his trauma, the family, the things that happened in his family, the things that happened. And so one thing led to another. The conversation ended, but I just feel like she still held her biases. I try to have an educating conversation with her. Didn't seem to work. So I just
Yeah.
I'll let it go. But it's just I'm saying all this to say that as black people and as white folks, and if anybody white person is listening to this, please don't be dismissive of other people's traumatic experiences because you haven't experienced it. And I think a lot of them, when it comes to slavery, I think a lot of it is guilt as well. White people, a lot of them have guilt. They don't want to be looked at as they're the bad guy. Nobody said you were the bad guy. You know.
Yeah, and
But yeah,
I think you said it so clearly. Don't dismiss other people's trauma. Period.
yeah,
Like if a military vet comes to me and they talk about the trauma that they're experiencing. I'm not going to try to say, well, you know, a lot of countries have been in longer wars, or
Mhm.
like
Yeah, I mean, it's and that's what I was trying to get her to see. It's like you're saying this, but then you're making a comment saying we don't hold a market share on traumatic or market share on violence or atrocities. I'm like, okay, um,
yeah.
that's yeah.
You know, the way
And
that
this
I deal
person,
with people who pull out the everybody had slavery narratives, or the history, oh, we have a short
mhm,
history narrative, these points,
mhm,
I always try to get them to reflect on why they're saying that.
mhm,
Because ultimately, if you trace the logic for making that kind of comment and the kind of conversation you were trying to have, you're going to come to a foundation of, you are trying to diminish
mhm,
the trauma, the terror of slavery. You know, I mean, there's no other reason you would say those things in the context of that conversation. And I think the reason why that's such a good strategy is to get people to backtrack their thinking that way, is because
mhm.
ultimately a lot of people don't even realize that that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
You know, they consciously don't
yeah,
realize that's what they're doing. So once they consciously realize that and they can't deny it, then that opens the door to them making a choice. Okay, am I going to continue doing that, or am I going to open myself up to, hey, maybe I'm dealing with my own biases, and this is an opportunity for me to change, you know?
yeah. And I after that conversation was over, I kind of let it go, and I said, oh yeah, she has some biases going on there. But what worries me is the fact that you are interpreting. You're working at a plantation. You know, we don't know the things that went on here. We know the stories. We know the little pieces here and there of what happened here. We don't know the everyday day to day life, but we know the institution of slavery and what happened. Right? Generally, we do. And you're teaching people. You're going out and teaching folks this. And I talked to my executive director, and she was telling me how she went on her tour. She shadows our tours every now and then, the boss, and she mentioned to me that she said, "Oh yeah, when we were on the tour, she mentioned that the mistress of the plantation taught the enslaved children how to read, and she didn't mention anything after that."
What?
It made it seem like it's just a happy. We're teaching them how to read. We're teaching the black, but from what I know, that when enslaved people were taught how to read, it was for to use them for something. Oh, we needed you. Okay, well, I need you to learn how to read so I can send you to the
Exactly. It
store.
wasn't altruistic. They're not teaching slaves to
Right,
read for altruistic purposes.
right. It was for it to be used for something. And so that's what something that she's not teaching.
Very
Um,
interesting. So
yeah.
even so she gets hired to give these tours at a plantation, but she has these beliefs about slavery and race. So interesting. Like, I mean, isn't that in and of itself an example of, I mean, can you imagine hiring someone to do a job when their beliefs don't really align with what the job is meant to accomplish, you know? But of course, in this race context, that's that in and of itself, the fact that she was hired at all
Mhm. Yeah.
shows, you know, that there is this element of white supremacy, even in places where race plays a prominent role in what's going on, you know?
Mhm.
Pretty
Yes.
crazy stuff. So what did your supervisor,
Well,
did it just end
she
there?
said she said she would talk to her about it. She said she gave me, and this is my supervisor, a white woman as well. And so she was like, well, sometimes when people have biases, you can't change it. You can talk to them, but you can't really change their biases.
Wow, she
And I
said
said,
that, huh?
that's what she said. And I'm like, okay, what did the occupation, what you're doing is misleading people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she also doesn't need to be giving tours at a plantation.
No,
Like, if
no,
we're
and that's it. She does not need to be given tours. And one of the comments that she made, she said, you hate white women. She said, I hate white women. I said, I don't hate white women.
what?
Yeah, she made that comment. She said, you hate white women.
Oh
And I
my
said, I don't hate
god.
white women. I love white, I love everybody. You know what I'm saying? But it's just, I don't hate white women because I think at one point in the conversation, we started talking about experiences of different races of people. And I brought up Mary Turner, Emmett Till, uh, the destruction of Tulsa, and all of these things that happen to black people, black towns all over the United States, because of what a white woman said and what a white woman did. And I said, I don't hate white women, but I'm just talking about all the atrocities that happen. It's just to me is it's really interesting how they will duck and dodge things instead of just dealing with it.
I love that you said that. And it reminds you keep reminding me of all these stories that I haven't thought about in a while. Like, here's another one. So I'm at this conference for mathematics educators from the community college system in North Carolina. And I'm hanging out. We're hanging out in the hotel bar, area. And there's a colleague of mine who's a racialized black man, Roderick. And then there's a woman, I can't think of her name right now, but she's a racialized white woman, and they have a good relationship. I'm meeting her, like newly meeting her and getting to know her. And the subject of race ends up coming up. And she ends up pushing back heavily against something that I said that would implicate white supremacy and the existence of white supremacy. And and what was so funny about that scenario is that Roderick, the racialized black man who was my colleague, he was encouraging me to stop talking about it. He was actually encouraging me not to continue the conversation with her, which I ignored because, like, I never shy away from these conversations about race. I never have since I was a child. But, like, I mean, he was urgently trying to stop this conversation from continuing. So that was one thing I thought was interesting. And then the way that I got her to, like, kind of calm down and realize that she was telling herself a story about what was going on instead of showing and listening to what I was actually saying is that, my best friend actually is a white woman. Okay. Yeah. My best friend is a white woman. I've known her since we were in, ninth grade, decades now. And we have maintained our friendship for this whole time. Now, the reason why we've maintained it is because she is anti-racist. She has anti-racism as a value for her life, and she always has since she was young. So that's why our relationship has endured, and a lot of other ones have fallen by the wayside because people don't have those values. And she thought that I was somehow getting on white people for being white, And I was like, well, how can these two things coexist, right? How can I have a best friend for decades that's a white woman and also I'm against white people, And she had to wrestle, she basically it forces people to wrestle with, okay, so what was happening there? What were you doing? Right. What were you feeling? What were you thinking? And why? Because it has nothing to do with reality, and that's where people can start saying, okay, so what does it have to do with my internal biases that maybe I need to unravel? And it gives people a chance, right? But like, think about it. Had I stopped the conversation, she would have never got there. She would have never got to that place of uncertainty. She would have just believed that her anger was justified, right? Her uncomfortableness was, justified and based upon somehow what she was projecting on me as my hatred of white people or my, dislike of white people or whatever it was. So yeah, I just found that to be relevant to what you were saying because we can't let the conversation kind of die and we can't let it be stopped, right? Like people must be forced to confront their biases, especially when they're in positions where those biases can play a significant role in outcomes, right? So like if you're giving a tour at a plantation and you're somebody who has been indoctrinated to believe that slavery wasn't a big deal, it wasn't as bad as people say, and it was even beneficial for some, then that is the message that you're going to promote to other people, and you're going to be spreading disinformation, the complete opposite of what a museum is meant to do.
That's right.
Yeah, that's crazy that that's taken so lightly.
Yeah, it's something that I've dealt with multiple places. That's one of that. There's those workplace biases that I've told you about that I've gone through.
How
Um,
long have you been doing this work?
we'll say about a year, and we'll say about a year and 4 months. About a year and 4 months full time
Gotcha.
working there.
Well, how interesting. You have a lot of stories for a year and 4 months. And
Oh yes, a
yeah.
lot.
Thanks for watching. For access to the full-length conversation and all of the 2-hour-long unedited conversations that I've had on race, click the support link in the description below. Thanks for your support and see you next time.